Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and this morning we're meeting with Kevin Thompson, author of Friends, Partners, and Lovers, What It Takes to Make Your Marriage Work. Kevin, welcome to the program.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Great to be with you. Kevin is lead pastor at Community Bible Church, a growing multi-site church with 4 locations in western Arkansas. Every year he meets with nearly 100 couples with a range of needs, from premarital counseling to navigating the most serious betrayals. A marriage and parenting conference speaker, he lives with his wife Jenny and their 2 children in Arkansas, and he blogs at www.kevinathompson.com. Well, Kevin, you've written a book, and there are so many books on marriage, on relationships, the statistical analysis of what makes marriage work, what makes marriage not work. I always tell the story that I have a friend that was married for over 70 years. And at their anniversary celebration, I asked the wife, how did you live with Tom for all these years? And she said, I woke up the morning after our wedding and I knelt at the foot of my bed and I began to pray. And I prayed the same prayer every single day since that day. And I said, what was the prayer? And she said it was quite simple. It was, Lord, today has got to be better than yesterday. That was her prayer. I think, Kevin, you're frozen. There we go. You were looping. In preparation for the show, I wanted to share some things with you, get some background from you, to kind of put things in perspective about facts on love and marriage from Pew Research that just came out in February of why people get married. 88% say they get married because of love. 81% say they want to make a lifelong commitment. 76% companionship, 49% having children, 30% a relationship recognized in a religious ceremony, 28% financial stability, and 23% for legal rights and benefits. That's kind of different than we might expect. There's some factors in there that were really quite surprising as to one of the motivations. Lifelong commitment and love are things that I think that we're indoctrinated with. Companionship, certainly. A relationship recognized in a religious ceremony is kind of an odd one for me. Financial stability, I would think that marriage would be a recipe for the opposite of financial stability. As a single person, you're in charge of how you spend, what you save. And then for legal rights and benefits, maybe those are tax benefits and insurance benefits. But what led you to really dig into the study of marriage, what makes marriage work, and these 3 very specific roles of friend, partner, and lover, that you've been able to see that it is a combination of those 3 distinct roles that makes marriage work? What was your model for that?
Yeah, I think your study, I think it shows something very important, and that is there's a lot going on when it comes to marriage. And it's not just one thing. Clearly, love is the most important aspect, especially in a Western society, especially from what we go by. And I think that should be a majority issue. But it shows that other things are at play, and that there are cultural expectations. The idea of a religious ceremony, what I'm hearing whenever I hear that in the study is in part, well, mom and dad and grandpa and grandma kind of expect me to get married. And so that's an aspect. And I see people on a regular basis, unfortunately, get married for those reasons. And if that's the lone reason, that's not a good reason to get married. The concept of financial stability is clearly at play. I see that a lot in remarriages, where somebody has their first relationship maybe go bad, and they're looking for a partner that can give them some of that financial issue. Whenever I looked at the friend, partner, lover concept, what I was looking at was, what is the basic job description of a spouse? Whenever I got married, nobody handed me a sheet and said, here are the things that you're supposed to do. Here's what a spouse is supposed to do. And so as I began to look at what actually is that, we dug into the beginning of the Bible, back in Genesis. And before sin entered the world, God created marriage. And there was this basic concept that I think was at play. Whenever he created Adam, there was a task that he gave Adam, and he was going to give Adam a partner to help fulfill that task. He paraded the animals before Adam, said pick one, and Adam said none of these are good enough. And so God created Eve, and it was a partner that the text says was fit for him. So there was a task, there was a partnership where they were supposed to work together to accomplish this task. But the idea that this helper was fit for him, there was something unique about Eve that was different from all the other animals. And I think what was unique there is it was a peer relationship. It was a friendship that was actually going to take place. And then, of course, at the end of that passage in Genesis 2, you have the famous text that Adam and Eve were naked and they were not ashamed. There was this close intimacy that was going to be there. And as I looked at that in Genesis and began to study it, I realized that the basic dynamic of what makes a marriage hasn't changed. Sin has clearly changed it, culture has clearly changed, but those basic concepts, and to put those into three basic roles of friend, partner, and lover, if you can do those three things, you can have a healthy marriage. And whenever I think about friendship, I think about the concept that I always have somebody walking by my side. Somebody's always with me. I'm not in this world alone. I think it's one of our great fears, the great fears of humanity, is that we are going to be alone. Our sin so often isolates us. It shames us to where we feel as though we're all alone. In marriage, in a healthy marriage where friendship is established, it means you always have somebody who is by your side. And as a partner, it means you always have somebody who has your back. Which means you can scan the horizon 180 degrees and look for potential threats or possibilities, opportunities, and they're looking the other direction, 180 degrees, looking for the same thing. And it now doubles now your potential, your opportunity to, you can nip threats in the bud very quickly. You can jump on opportunities. And so in a healthy marriage, you always have somebody who has your back. And then intimacy is the concept of looking somebody face to face and seeing the fullness of who they are, faults and strengths, weaknesses all together, and yet having this love that encompasses no matter what. And I think in many ways that if you can always be by your spouse's side, if you can always have their back, if you can always see them and love them no matter what, you will have a healthy marriage.
This didn't just come to you as an epiphany. Did you have a role model? Your mom and dad, your grandmother, your grandfather, your aunt and uncle. Did you have it because it was a good model, or it's because I don't want to be that, I don't want to do that, I'm not going to replicate those things? Or was it a harvesting and seeing with a clear lens of what it's supposed to be and defining it for yourself and then applying it in your own life?
Yeah, well, I had very human models, and so there were good and there were bad in all the relationships that I was surrounded by. And so my parents are divorced, but I remember many great times when they were together and things that I would like to mimic in that relationship. But clearly the outcome of where things went is something I don't want to be a part of. My grandparents on my mother's side, I was very close with them. I was close with both sets of grandparents, but my grandparents on my mother's side lived much longer. They actually, ultimately, when they died, they lived next door to me, and they were married 70 years. And that really was the model for me and a couple growing up of who I wanted to be. I can't think of either one of them individually apart from the other. And so clearly that was an important role. So I think having their model was an encouragement to me. I think with my parents, in many ways, you could probably say that impacted why marriage is so important to me, to see the pain that was caused there, not only in my own life, but in theirs as well. And so, no, this wasn't just something that came to me all of a sudden. It was something that I became passionate about at a young age because I understood the pain of divorce. But then I also understood the potential that was there. I knew the goodness that was within my family, within my own parents, but then also seeing it within my grandparents, the love that was there. And so in part, wanting to avoid what my parents might have experienced, but wanting to experience and wanting to have what my grandparents had became a passion for me. And then I kind of stumbled into writing about marriage, to be honest with you. I started the blog kevinathompson.com back in 2013, was writing about leadership. I have a child with special needs, was writing about what that looks like. And just one day wrote a post on marriage that I thought was pretty simple, wasn't a big deal. And yet the response on it was immediate. And so I told my wife, I said, there's something here. There's a market here for this where people maybe need some common sense ideas about marriage from somebody who isn't maybe a therapist or a counselor. And so I began to write every Wednesday about that. And very quickly it became clear that while I would write on other topics, marriage would be the centerpiece of what would drive traffic to my website and where the real interaction became. And so this book became an overflow of people just asking to have this material in one place and for me to kind of flesh out my thoughts a little bit deeper. And so I was pretty surprised. You know, as a pastor, obviously, I'm in a unique situation. I'm around couples, individuals as they grow up, as they begin to date. I'm with them oftentimes during the engagement process. Clearly, I'm with them at the wedding ceremony. I'm there when the babies are born. But I'm also often the first phone call they make when things begin to go wrong. And if the marriage does break apart, I'm there with them. The process and relationship, both the good and the bad. Whereas let's say cancer maybe is a moments, but also in the darkest moments as well. So that gives me a unique perspective.
In your marriage, which came first? The friends, partners, lovers, or the figuring it out of the defined role?
Yeah, I think the friendship came first. I think it's what most comes first. I think it's what should come first. To me, friendship is the very foundation of any relationship. I think in many ways that's what a first date is all about. If you do in a traditional setting, a first date is quite light, and then I think as the relationship develops, then the intimacy begins to pick up, and so my wife and I, followed biblical guidelines, and so whenever we were married, then the lover section began to really kick in many ways, and for me, the partnership was the most surprising aspect. It's the part that maybe I never really thought about growing up or even early on in marriage. I knew friendship was important. Obviously, intimacy is going to be important. But to me, partnership has defined my 30s. Now, I'm going to turn 40 this year. And to me, our 30s books and working on this website together. It's not true for everybody, but for us, it went friendship and then intimacy and then partnership, and all three of those roles are now actively at play.
You mentioned remarriage, which is also statistically covered in this latest research that 4 in 10 new marriages involve remarriage. So 40% of the marriages going on now are remarriage for at least one or both. First-time marriages, 60%. Second-time marriages, 40%. So there's I think there is not only a need for this kind of text as a guideline for building a strong marriage, but an understanding of what you did or did not do in the previous marriage that you should be doing or setting as the benchmark for this new marriage or this new relationship. And I found many of the discussions, many of the revelations, the transparency that you gave throughout the book to be fairly common maladies. People experience, you put a name to them, weariness. You have several names, and they're kind of, yeah, that is what I'm feeling. Yes, I can now name it. Now, you and I both have come from a counseling background. I no longer counsel, no longer have a congregation leading and doing this, but in counseling, you find that people are searching to find out what it is, name it, grab a hold of it, define it, and be able to diagnose it and develop a cure for it. And I think you've done that extremely well within the book of identifying some of these very critical issues that happen in marriage. The collaboration, if you will, it certainly has your name as the author, but I would suspect that your wife...
I think the concept of marriage...
Kevin, if you can hear me, there is something on your end contending for your Wi-Fi, so I'm going to ask you to look again at your computer and make sure that every application is closed. Facebook, Messenger, email, everything, because you're actually in a Wi-Fi frozen loop that is causing your audio and your video to freeze. So if you can hear me, I'm going to ask you to review any application on your computer that's open other than Skype.
Yeah, I can hear you. I have.
Well, you should be able to hear us and see. You should be able to hear us and see us. We're on fiber optic, so we're at an incredibly high rate of speed to you. But there's something on your end which is contending for your Wi-Fi that you may not even think is contending for Wi-Fi. That's why we want you to close all the other
I would
apps.
assume, yeah. I would assume it's my coworkers.
Could be. So you're in the office environment and there's other people working. Is your phone unplugged from Wi-Fi?
Yes, my phone's off.
Okay. All right. I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to take a commercial break right now. While we're doing that, we're going to reboot on your end to see if we can get a clear connection. We're talking with Kevin Thompson, author of Friends, Partners, and Lovers, and he breaks this book down into these three categories, three defined roles that shows us what it takes to make your marriage work. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere, and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our 1-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Kevin Thompson, author of Friends, Partners, and Lovers, What It Takes to Make Your Marriage Work. When we went to break, we were just about to get into the defined roles of this, not formula, but in-depth understanding of the biblical model. When I used to do premarital counseling, I kept a tennis ball on my desk. And when the couple sat down, I took the tennis ball and I threw it without saying a word to the groom. And he would catch it and I'd say, okay, for the next hour during the time we're together counseling, you are to manage, even if I say to you, open your Bible, even if I say to you, reach for this, you're to manage this and not put this ball down, not set it on the floor, not put it on the shelf, not stick it in your pocket. This is your new wife's heart. And it is in the palm of your hand, and it is being permanently placed there. And you're going to have to find a way to live your life holding the palm in the palm of your hand. You are the shepherd of your wife's heart. This is the definition of marriage. And I would say, well, now open your Bible, and they would look for ways to tuck it under their arm, and they became very, very conscious of the fact that I can't put this down. I cannot do this. I had a couple at their wedding where the groom had a tennis ball in his tuxedo and said that he took it on the honeymoon with him. He has it with him at his office. It is the reminder to him that the highest calling of a man in this relationship is to shepherd his wife's heart. And the tennis ball became kind of the image of that. Very effective. And it was a lesson that I had to learn personally, that I thought the highest calling was ministering the gospel. I thought the highest calling was saving the lost. I thought the highest calling was everything but God kind of took me to a place of revealing to me that a man's highest calling is shepherding the heart that he's entrusted them with.
I think that's great. The concept of above all else, guard your heart. Whenever you get married, that responsibility, in my opinion, expands. Not that you're ultimately in charge of your wife's heart. I'm not saying that at all. But there is this protective nature that you need to have within that relationship. And then I think as whenever I think about parenting, I think about that verse continually. Above all else, guard Ella's heart. Guard Silas's heart until they are old enough and responsible enough, mature enough to guard it for themselves. And so I think that's a great concept, and I might need to steal that illustration whenever I'm talking with couples.
Go for it. It is. They're usually shocked by it. The second time they walk in the door, I throw it to them. I don't wait for him to sit down because I want to catch him off guard. And the third time, he's just all ready. He just knows. He just knows the ball is coming.
Oh yeah.
But the concept, I think that we as men have been programmed not to understand our role in marriage. And because of that, we've defined ourselves by what we do or how we do what we do, what our vocation is, or our identity as a Jew, or however we do this, but this is something that's important because the first definition that you give is friend.
Yeah, and I think that ties into the heart. I really do. And I think whenever I think about friendship, I think about the concept of at the center piece of friendship is this idea of trust. Do I trust this other person? And that comes back to your illustration of the heart. I will trust somebody if I believe that they're going to treat my heart properly, that they're going to protect it. They're going to trust me if they believe that I'm going to protect their heart. And so I think you've hit on kind of what I'm trying to get at as well. At the very foundation of marriage is this concept of friendship. And friendship to me is defined by I trust this person. I trust them enough to now live my life with them, to have them walk alongside me. Within that concept of trust also comes the idea of I enjoy being with them. I enjoy their presence. I believe in them. I want to be with them. But I think you're absolutely right. And if a couple doesn't have friendship, the rest of the marriage is kind of in danger. I thought about this illustration after I wrote the book, and so if I ever update it, I might have to go with it. But I thought about you take the idea of a house, and so you have a foundation, you have walls, and you have a roof. Whenever I think about this, if you look at it, the foundation is friendship, the walls are partnership, and then the roof to me is intimacy. It's being a lover. And if we don't start off with that basic foundation being strong, I think a couple is in great trouble. I laugh often whenever I talk to young couples, and they're not couples, they're friends. They want to find a romantic partner, and yet they have this great friend of the opposite sex. And I'll ask, why don't you date them? And they'll say, well, I don't want to ruin a good friendship. And I laugh. I'm like, that's the very heart of a marriage, is a good friendship. That doesn't mean you have to marry your best friend if you're in high school or college. I'm not saying that. But to reject that just because of the friendship component is ridiculous, because your spouse should be ultimately your best friend. And so it all begins there. And I think in many ways, for many of your listeners, it's very easy to have that friendship component whenever you're young. But as life gets chaotic, as you're raising kids, as you're trying to pay bills, as you really begin to focus in on the partnership of marriage, if you're not intentional, and that's one of the key words of the book,
right.
If you're not intentional, your friendship will begin to drift away. And many couples, the best thing that they can do to help their marriage is to strengthen their friendship. And one of the prescriptions I often give for couples, especially who are in a busy season of life, is just take a walk together. Just find a way to get out, to enjoy each other's company. And what happens whenever you're walking is you begin to talk, and you tend to drift into other topics other than just who's going to pick up the kids or how we're going to pay this bill. You see things, you interact. And if you can begin to build with intentionality that friendship back, it will transform every other aspect of the relationship. So I truly believe a marriage begins with friendship. But yet, if you don't work on that friendship through every season of life, you have to rebuild it. You have to recreate it, redefine it. I see this at empty nest time. People don't understand this, but I have some articles on my website about it. If you look at the chart of marital satisfaction, the lowest point in most marriages is whenever they're raising teenagers. And when those teenagers kind of begin to leave the house, it becomes a redefining moment. But what people don't understand, that if they can push through that moment and they can stay connected, marriages, the satisfaction rate in marriages just skyrocket from that point forward. And they actually begin to exceed what was experienced during the honeymoon phase. But unfortunately, many couples divorce either whenever they first have children, in those toddler years when they're most tired, or when they're raising teenagers, when they're absolutely exhausted in so many ways. And so in that empty nest time, if they can go back and recreate the friendship, their marriage will skyrocket.
You know, Kevin, you use the word friend as if there was a universal definition that everyone agreed upon, that a friend is this. So I'd like to spend a minute and conjugate friend.
Yeah.
A friend is not your enemy. So here you have two people that dated, they were friends, they became friends in their dating process, they get married, they're still friends, and they have an argument, but the argument sounds like they're enemies. And often one of the two takes the position, you're my enemy. And the concept of friendship goes completely out the window. It's removed from the equation. We're now polarized. We are now on the opposite side of the spectrum, where and one of the counseling methods I use, and you may have this one too, is I would have a couple stand back to back, and I would ask them to describe what they saw. And of course they were looking in a completely different direction. One was describing what was on the right wall, one was describing on the left wall. And I said, now I want you to turn your head. Don't change your position. Don't move your feet. Do not change your position. But I want you to turn your head a quarter to the right, and you a quarter to the left. And now they both come into focus. I said, now neither one of you have changed your position. You have not given up your position. You've changed your perspective. And what you saw as being a world apart, you were that close together, so your positions are not that far off. Your perspective of your positions were that far off.
Yeah.
I'm a man who came to faith late in life, had gone through marriage and divorce. Friend to me meant absolutely single most trustworthy person, incapable of the act of betrayal, devoid of the DNA marker for betrayal. And I have the same best friend I've had for over 50 years. And for he and I, it was a knowledge that there would never be a betrayal, that friendship would be intact. There was a period of time we didn't talk to or see each other for 10 years. Our lives went in completely different directions. But I still would consider him to be my best friend. I'm 65. We were college roommates. So we were friends in high school, went off to college, and moved to the same city and lived not far down the street from each other. And now we're living two completely different lives. But this is somebody that would never betray me. That falls into my category of friend.
Yeah. I think it goes back to that basic concept again. You're speaking there of trust. And whenever I think about friendship, it is the idea of I trust that Jenny loves me, that she truly wants what is best for me, that she desires it. As a matter of fact, there are times in which she desires what's best for me more than I desire what's best for me. And so whenever disagreements do occur, whenever frustrations are there, we have to come back to that basic perspective of we are on each other's side. We might have a different perspective like you're talking about. We might have different expectations. We might just disagree. You know, John Gottman talks about so much of marital issues. I think he might use the statistic of 80% of marital issues aren't solvable because they're just different perspectives. Now, when a couple can have a healthy partnership and see those different perspectives as their strength, then that aids the friendship. So they begin to trust each other better, to understand that those differences are actually our allies, and we can use them now to our benefit. But I see it so often, I know you've probably seen it as well, where an unhealthy couple does not see differences, disagreements, or frustrations as potentials to move the relationship forward. Instead, they see them as extreme threats. And what happens is one spouse begins to aim at the other spouse, and then they're enemies with each other. What I try to help people with whenever they come in to see me for some initial kind of conversations is, let's try to get on the same side and view the issue is out there, and we're going to attack it together. We're going to fight alongside of each other against something. If we're not fighting alongside of each other against something, we will be fighting against each other. And so if a couple can just change their perspective on that concept, that yes, there is this issue, but this issue isn't between us. This issue is actually outside of us. And now together we're going to try to solve it or try to find a workable solution for us. Then that friendship can become the strength that leads them through the difficult days. And notice how quickly I'm vacillating back and forth between friendship and partnership. They're so intertwined there. I see it all the time. If you're not playing your role as a partner, if you're kind of in my stage of life, you're in your late 30s, you got a couple small kids, you got a busy life, and you just walk in at the end of the day and throw your clothes on the floor and expect your spouse to pick them up and to clean them, you're not playing your role as a partner. That's going to begin to hinder your friendship. And she's not going to trust you. She's not going to think that you value her heart, her responsibility, her giftings. There's a wedge that's going to be formed, and something guys need to know, and women already know it. When the friendship begins to be severed, that's going to affect your intimacy. You're not going to have as close intimacy as you could if you had a good partnership and a good friendship. So we need to notice how these three roles, elements, they're lenses through which we view the relationship. They are so intertwined that when one begins to struggle, it begins to ripple out into the other areas. I can't tell you how many times I've had a couple sitting on my couch, and I just ask what's going on, and within 5 minutes I can say, well, here's what's happened. Your partnership is struggling. You don't think she's carrying her load, or you don't think he's carrying his load. And what that has done is you've lost respect for each other. And I think partnership is defined by respect. And as that respect has been lost, you've now lost trust in each other. And so that's hurt your friendship. So you don't feel as close as you once did. And that's beginning to ripple over into the bedroom. And they sat there with their eyes wide open thinking, how in the world do you know this? Well, I know this because I hear it every single day, that when one of these begin to struggle, it's going to flow over into the other areas.
Maybe I am technically now I qualify as a senior citizen. Kind of hilarious to me as I'm working 90-hour weeks and feel greater than I ever felt before. But when I read the Bible as everything in it is the model for how I should live my life. And therefore, my vision for marriage was that if I esteem the other more than myself, if I am placing the needs of my spouse first, and doing all I can do to see that those needs are met, and they are also in the same framework, that they are esteeming me more than themselves, they are placing my needs above their needs, then logically, would that not then mean that both our needs are being met, but they're not being met because I'm meeting them, but because we found a framework to work within biblically, where because we were friends, you now know what I like and don't like, because we were partners and we shared in common task, and you found out what I was good at and what I was not good at. Now we are at this point where life is happening, and you're looking out for me and I'm looking out for you, and I don't have that kitchen sink argument that you don't ever do this and you don't ever do that and you don't ever do this and you don't ever do that. I've sat through those, and it's puzzling to me. Now I'm single and have been for many years. But my image is still my friend had my back. It's the military motto. Mm-hmm. My responsibility is the back of the person in front of me. It's not for the 20 guys behind me. I'm just responsible for the back of the man in front of me. Yeah. And I have to trust that the one behind me is going to protect my back. It works in military, it works in the battlefield, it works in creating this semper fi, this fraternity, this unity, this commonality that says that I've got your six, I've got your back. Is marriage not supposed to be like that?
I think that's a great point. You know, whenever I do a wedding ceremony, I most often use Philippians 2 as the text. And right before kind of that hymn about who Christ is, Paul says to the church at Philippi, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourself. So it is this concept of the other first. And so what I talk about with the couple is they're making a foolish choice in many ways from a worldly perspective, which is whenever you're single, you get to be number one. You get to set yourself, your priorities. It's about your hopes, your goals, your dreams. But what you're doing whenever you say I do is you are saying I'm going to now submit what I want to the betterment of us, to the betterment ultimately also of you as an individual. And so you're setting the other person above yourself, setting you as a couple now above you as an individual. And that's a risky proposition because you're doing that to a sin-filled person who you run the risk of them abusing that in some way. But whenever a couple can jointly submit their own individual wills now to the betterment of what is best for us, and I'm going to submit and sacrifice some of my hopes, some of my dreams, some of the things I can do on my own for what is best for us, I think the marriage will thrive. And yet whenever it goes wrong, so often it can come back to this Philippians 2 passage. And what has happened is at least one of the individuals in the couple has began to look at their own self-interest at the expense of their spouse. And so I see it so often with many of my friends who they desire to have the benefits of a healthy marriage. And yet at the same time, they want the benefits of being single as well, where they get to do their own thing. And so they'll, not only will they go play golf, I don't have a problem with that, but after they play golf, they'll stick around and have lunch. And then after that, they'll stick around and play cards. And then after that, they'll watch the game. And then they'll go home, having been gone all day long without any negotiation with their spouse, and they'll wonder, why is their marriage struggling? Well, their marriage is struggling because you have put your own self-interest above that of your spouse, of your family, and you have in no way submitted yourself to the well-being of who you are as a couple. And so I think Philippians 2 goes right along with what you're saying. And if you can literally live that out every single day, clearly we're going to fail. But if we can live that out every single day, I think you can have a healthy marriage. And no doubt, they're going to be full of struggles and sorrows. And unfortunately, some marriages just aren't going to work out. That's the way it happens in life. But the vast majority of relationships can succeed if a couple will humble themselves and do the work necessary to make the marriage work. You know, the idea I talk about in the book, some of these marriage statistics, you've said some of them, the idea that 40% of all marriages incorporate a remarriage. I don't doubt that statistic, but I think it's probably a little bit skewed because of the number of remarriages that are taking place. It tends to skew some of the stats. And so whenever you hear the stat that 50% of all marriages end in divorce, well, that's true in a general concept, right. But it's not true. It's not true for a first-time marriage. 50% of first-time marriages do not end in divorce. As a matter of fact, if you just do some very basic things, if you wait until your early 20s to get married, so if you don't get married too young, if you go to church at least a couple times a month, just those two things alone then radically transform the stats of the likelihood of your marriage staying together. And so if you'll read a book like this, if you'll do some of the activities, if you'll show intention within your relationship, your marriage is not the flip of a coin. I say in the book, marriage is not the flip of a coin. It's the flip of a will. And so if you can literally flip your will into this concept of I'm going to submit to the betterment of us together, you can have a healthy marriage. I don't doubt that.
Back in the day when marriages were arranged, they weren't friends, they became friends. Mm-hmm. They weren't partners, they became partners. And they weren't lovers, they became lovers as the outcropping of this arranged marriage. There was not a high rate of divorce in arranged marriages. Somehow they managed to see it to their 60th and 70th wedding anniversary. My grandfather, at his 50th wedding anniversary, stood up at the podium, and he was a man of very few words, and he said, all I can tell you is 50 years and it wasn't easy. And he sat down. And he got a standing ovation, because the truth of the matter is 50 years with the same person is not easy. There are things that happen, changes that take place, challenges. You have a child with some special needs, which requires a sacrifice. It requires a commitment. It requires a prioritization. It requires a sharing of responsibility, not an abdicating. Statistically, couples with special needs children divorce more often. I didn't bargain for this. I didn't sign up for this. We work regularly with Peter Rosenberger, who is the caregiver to caregivers. He's been a caregiver to his wife, who's had over 38 surgeries and 17 amputations, and he knows what it's like to be a full-time caregiver, so he ministers to caregivers so that they have outlets, they have ways where this, and I don't use the word burden in the sense that any child of special need is a burden in any way, or that it is burdensome. They are incredible blessings, and we cover so many stories about how God so amazingly works in the families that have been gifted with a special needs child, not burden gifted, and what it's taught them in so many different ways.
I think in so many ways, I think what you're getting at is a key principle, and it's something I think many Americans have forgotten specifically, but then it probably goes beyond that. And that is this idea that life is not easy, and we have to expect that. But for some reason, maybe it's Hollywood influence, maybe it's our own fantasy, maybe it's expectation. We have this idea when it comes to marriage that there's a soulmate that's out there for us. And this person was created uniquely for us. And if we can just find our other half, the best fit, then that's going to be easy. And at least that part of life will be easy when everything else is difficult. But it's just foolish thinking. It just doesn't work that way. And so the reality is that marriage is supposed to be difficult. There are supposed to be struggles. Now, I think one reason I wrote this book is because I think many of the things that we struggle with, we shouldn't. We don't have to. There is an easier path to many of these issues. But in the end, a sin-filled person is marrying a sin-filled person in the midst of a sin-filled world. We are in desperate need of grace. We need to receive it. We need to give it. We need to endure. We need to understand life's going to be difficult. But if you have this basic bond of friendship, where I am by your side and you are by my side, and you have this partnership where I have your back and you have my back, if you have this intimacy where I see you and I see all your faults, but I love you in spite of everything that's going on, then whenever we face a challenge, we confront that together, we attack it together, we know there are going to be struggles, but we also know that we are going to get through to the other side. And when a couple has that mentality, then even struggles become blessings. Because in the midst of the struggle, I know that I'm going to have part of my sin-filled heart revealed, so a part that I didn't even know was there, and God's grace is going to be able to touch it. I know Jenny's going to experience the same thing. I know we're going to learn to communicate better. We're going to be able to learn some new skills, stack them on the previous skills that we have already learned. And so the next challenge that comes along, we're going to be stronger and better and more prepared. And you better be that, because the struggles in life tend to get more difficult. And so if you're learning those things and growing and building, you can do those things. I think if we have this tenacity, this grit, that we're going to do everything in our power to make this marriage work, if we both have that, then I think you can have a very successful marriage. Marriages end when one of the spouses think the pain is not worth the effort anymore. And at that moment, the relationship takes on a toxic kind of turn, and it likely won't make it unless that spouse or both spouses have a change in concept.
Well, you're exactly right. Kevin, unfortunately, we're out of time, but we've been talking with Kevin A. Thompson, author of Friends, Partners, and Lovers, What It Takes to Make Your Marriage Work. You can follow him at kevinathompson.com. And this is something that if you're thinking about marriage, this is a great model for you to create a vision for what you want that marriage to be. If you are getting married, it's become something that the two of you together can use to create your vision of your marriage. And if you are married and you're wondering, can it be better? And the answer is yes, no matter how good it is. If you can focus on these three specific areas, being friends, being partners, and becoming lovers, you'll find that there's a great deal of secret of success in marriage contained within this book. Again, Friends, Partners, and Lovers, What It Takes to Make Your Marriage Work. Kevin Thompson, thank you so much for being with us here on Revealing the Truth.
Well, thanks for having me.
God bless you. We'll talk again soon. We're going to take a short break, and when we return, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.